Here was not an embassy. It was a CIA center. This was a den of espionage, where they were plotting against the Iranian people.
States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil.
Let's get right to the issue. Can we afford to go to war with Iran? And the answer is no.
This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
Fighters that work with the IRGC Quds Force in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bahrain.
It will respond. It will respond against the oil. It will respond in the Persian Gulf. It will respond against our troops.
The behavior and the objectives of the regime are not going to change, and therefore the only solution is to change the regime itself. And that's why before 2019, we here will celebrate in Tehran. Thank you very much.
I spent 21 years in the CIA, almost all of it in the Middle East. The CIA put me through Arabic, 2 years of it. I served in Levant. I served in Lebanon during the worst years. Morocco, Syria, Lebanon, where else? I've been to Iran on visits before the revolution, and most recently was Morocco, and I was in France for a while where I covered the Middle East. So it's my entire career has been in the Middle East. I resigned from the CIA in December 1997. I was involved in an aborted coup in Iraq in March 1995, and I just left to do other things, mainly to write.
Look at the book, The Devil We Know, Dealing with the New Iranian Superpower. The author is Robert Baer, ex-CIA. He is out in Berkeley, California this early morning for him. Raleigh, North Carolina. Lewis, you're on the Independent line.
Hi,
Lewis.
thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Just wanted to say, I really don't know why everyone is so threatened by Iran. I feel like they're a country that's heading in the right direction. I think this is just a bunch of propaganda to make them seem like an evil superpower.
You know, I totally agree. Let's get right to the issue. Can we afford to go to war with Iran? And the answer is no. If we think that we're going to bomb their nuclear facilities in a tactical strike, and that's going to be the end of it, that's completely misunderstanding the country of Iran. It will respond. It will respond against the oil. It will respond in the Persian Gulf. It will respond against our troops in Iraq. The Chief of Staff, Joint Chiefs of Staff has said very clearly there will be consequences to an attack on Iran. Our military is saying, wait, hold on. Let's not make this a political issue. Let's consider the military consequences of an attack, and Joint Chiefs of Staff is absolutely right. I think in terms of hegemony, it wants to control, it wants to make sure that the countries on its border answer to Tehran in one way or another, not by occupation, but what they want to do is have Afghanistan, Iraq, Central Asia, and the Arab countries in one way or another deferring to Tehran on important national security issues. And as they would. I mean, just as we would like to have Ottawa defer to us or Mexico defer to us, in the same way Iran would like the same. Occupation is a bad word, or empire is a bad word, because it doesn't really apply. They just wanted predominance of influence in that region.
In 2002, a Marine general led a fictional version of Iran in a war game against the United States and won. The U.S. military tapped Lieutenant General Paul Van Riper to lead the Red opposing forces in the most expensive military exercise in history. He was put in command of an inferior Middle Eastern-inspired military, and his mission was to go against the full might of the American armed forces. In the first 2 days, he sank an entire carrier battle group. The exercise was called Millennium Challenge 2002. It was designed by the Joint Forces Command over the course of 2 years, and it had 13,500 participants, numerous live and simulated training sites, and was supposed to pit an Iran-like Middle Eastern country against the US military, which would be fielding advanced technology it didn't even plan to implement until 5 years later. The war game would begin with a forced entry exercise that included the 82nd Airborne and the 1st Marine Division. When the Blue Forces issued a surrender ultimatum, Van Riper, commanding the Red Forces, turned them down. Since the Bush Doctrine of the period included preemptive strikes against perceived enemies, Van Riper knew the Blue Forces would be coming for him, and they did. But the 3-star general didn't spend 41 years in the Marine Corps being timid. As soon as the US Navy was beyond the point of no return, he hit him. And he hit him hard. Missiles from land-based units, civilian boats, and low-flying planes tore through the fleet as explosives-laden speedboats decimated the Navy using suicide tactics. His signal to initiate the attack was a coded message sent from the minarets of mosques at the call to prayer. In under 10 minutes, the whole thing was over, and Lieutenant General Paul Van Riper was victorious. So, how did 19 ships and some 20,000 US troops end up at the bottom of the Persian Gulf? It started with the OPFOR leadership. Van Riper was the epitome of the salty Marine Corps general officer. He was a 41-year veteran, both enlisted and commissioned, serving everywhere from Vietnam to Desert Storm. Van Riper attended the Marine Corps Amphibious Warfare School, the College of Naval Command and Staff, Army War College, and the Army's Airborne and Ranger schools. That is not the ribbon rack of a timid individual. In fact, the 3-star general had been retired for some 5 years by the time he led the Red Forces of Millennium Challenge. He was an old-school Marine capable of some old-school tactics, and he insisted that technology cannot replace human intuition and the study of basic nature of war, which he called a, quote, terrible, uncertain, chaotic, bloody business. When Van Riper commented on Millennium Challenge, he said that the Blue Forces were stuck in their own mode of thinking. Their vastly superior technology included advanced intelligence matrices and an operational net assessment that told them where the OPFOR vulnerabilities were and what Van Riper was most likely to do next out of a range of possible scenarios. They relied heavily on that. When the Blue took out Red's microwave towers and fiber optics, they expected his forces to use satellite and cell phones that could be monitored. Not a chance. Van Riper instead used motorcycle couriers, messages hidden in prayers, and even coded lighting systems on his airfields. Tactics employed during World War II. He struck first. He calculated how many cruise missiles their ships could handle, and in his terms, simply launched more than that. In fact, Van Riper hated the kind of analytical decision-making the Blue Forces were doing. He believed it took far too long. His resistance plan included ways of getting his people to make good decisions, using rapid cognition and analog but reliable communications. The other commanders involved called foul, complaining that a real OPFOR would never use the tactics Van Riper used. Except Van Riper's flotilla used boats and explosives like those used against the USS Cole in 2000, when it was attacked by a small explosives-laden boat in a Yemen port. In the end, the Blue Forces were all respawned, and Van Riper was prevented from making moves to counter the Blue Forces' landing. He had no radar, and wasn't allowed to shoot down incoming aircraft he would have otherwise accurately targeted. The rest of the exercise was scripted to let the Blue Force land and win. Van Riper walked out when he realized his commands were being ignored by the exercise planners. The jig was up. The 3-star wrote a 21-page critique of the exercise that was immediately classified. Van Riper spoke out against the rigged game anyway. Nothing was learned from this, he wrote. A culture not willing to think hard and test itself does not augur well for the future. Couldn't agree more.